of the air.
Assalamu alaikum and welcome to Roundup. This is where we take a look at the news making the headlines in the past week and the issues important to you.
We begin with a roundup of the top stories from around the globe.
Hundreds of thousands are without power across the southern and eastern United States in the aftermath of Hurricane Ida. Ida moved across the Caribbean through the week, making landfall in Cuba and then Louisiana, causing widespread destruction and ending in extreme rainfall and severe storms across the East Coast. Several people have tragically lost their lives. Water poured into subway stations, airports and people's homes, leading to states of emergency in New York and New Jersey. The Perseverance rover's robot drill made a hole into a thick slab of the planet to bring back to Earth. An attempt last month saw the sample crumble to dust, but this attempt shows a solid rock core being picked up. If the rock makes it back to Earth, it would be the first ever rock collected on another planet. We begin with the news that last week the US President Joe Biden declared that the war in Afghanistan is over. Now, this comes as the final troops are withdrawn from Afghanistan, ending one of the longest wars in history. As troops began to leave, a military group called the Taliban took control of the capital city, Kabul.
One of our reporters, Masroor Order, takes a look at exactly what has been happening in this country and the impact that decades of war and fighting has had on the kids there.
The US withdrawal from Afghanistan is now complete, ending a 20-year war but fueling a humanitarian and security crisis. While the August 31st deadline for the withdrawal was announced earlier this year, the situation deteriorated as the Taliban swept through the country, taking control of Kabul 2 weeks earlier. The history of the area is long and complicated, but let's take a brief look at how we got to this day. The land we know as Afghanistan today is a country surrounded by Pakistan, Iran, Turkmenistan, Uzbekistan, Tajikistan and China. A country over 31 million people, it is known as the graveyard of empires, as many foreign nations have tried to conquer it over the centuries. The foreign invasions led to an internal movement to resist the Soviets, leading to the creation of the Taliban, which took over the government in 1992. The Taliban immediately began implementing severe laws curtailing education and employment of women, enforcing law and order via public executions and amputations. The Taliban claimed it was acting according to Islam, but in fact its cruelties and injustices were completely against Islam's teachings. In 2001, the US launched a war in Afghanistan in response to the 9/11 attacks on the World Trade Center, beginning a 20-year war in which tens of thousands of foreign troops and Afghans have lost their lives. In April, President Biden announced a complete withdrawal by August 31st.
The fundamental obligation of a president, in my opinion, is to defend and protect America, not against threats of 2001, but against the threats of 2021 and tomorrow. That is the guiding principle behind my decisions about Afghanistan.
But the Afghan government, backed by foreign powers, was not able to sustain itself as the Taliban quickly took over regional governments and finally Kabul on August 15th. In the ensuing chaos, 123,000 people were evacuated out of Afghanistan in 2 weeks, including many Afghans who have worked alongside foreign entities and could be targeted by the Taliban government. Parents and children are separated, and 2 suicide bombings killed 169 Afghans and 13 US troops on August 26th. Many children within Afghanistan are now without homes, food, and basic necessities. As another foreign power retreats and leaves Afghanistan in disarray, and millions of Afghans suffer, we have the words of our Khalifa, Hazrat Mirza Masroor Ahmad, may Allah be his helper, to guide us in understanding the situation.
ये जंग तो पिछले 100 साल से लड़ी जा रही है अफ़गानिस्तान में, इस तरह ही हैं, फसाद फितने पैदा होते रहते हैं और ये तो सूरत हाल अफ़गानिस्तान की चल रही है, उस वक्त से चल रही है जब से कि हज़रत मसीह मौद अलैहिस्सलाम ने फरमाया था सैयद अब्दुल लतीफ़ शहीद की शहादत के बाद کہ تو امن میں نہیں رہے گی زمین کابل، تو امن تو برباد ہو گیا ان کا. اور یہ امن کی کیفیت جو ہے وہ بے امنی کی کیفیت تو وہ چل رہی ہے. اور اب بھی طالبان آ گئے ہیں تو یہ دیکھتے ہیں کس طرح حکومت چلاتے ہیں. اللہ تعالیٰ کی باتوں کو مانیں گے تو امن ہوگا، اللہ تعالیٰ کے بھیجے ہوئے کی مخالفت کو بند کریں گے تو امن قائم ہوگا. اور ہمارا کام یہی ہے کہ اس پیغام کو پہنچاتے رہنا اور کوشش اور دعا بھی کرتے رہنا کہ اللہ تعالیٰ کرے کہ ان لوگوں کو عقل آ جائے اور یہ ماننے والے ہوں، یہ کم از کم اپنے رویوں کو ٹھیک کرنے والے ہوں، ظلموں کو ختم کرنے والے ہوں. پھر بھی امن کی کوئی گنجائش ہے، اور پھر اللہ تعالیٰ معاف کرنے والا بھی ہے، معاف کرتا ہے.
Whilst many of us eat, rest, and sleep in peace, Afghans and children in particular are suffering within their country and around the world as refugees. So we must all pray that world leaders act with justice and create a peaceful world for all children to grow up in.
Jazakallah for that piece. Last Friday, our beloved Hazur, may Allah be his helper, delivered his Friday sermon from the Mubarak Mosque in Islamabad.
Now, beloved Hazur spoke about the passing of our brother, friend and colleague, Sayyid Talib Ahmed. Let's find out more with our Friday sermon summary.
Assalamu alaikum, my dear brothers and sisters. This week, Hazur mentioned the very sad martyrdom of Sayyid Talib Ahmed Sahab, who is a Waqf-e-Zindagi life devotee of the Jamaat and a key worker in the MTA news department. Did you know that Talib Sahab was a member of the Waqf-e-Nur scheme as well? This special scheme is where parents devote their children to the service of the Jamaat before they are born. The Waqf-e-Nur scheme was launched in 1987 by the 4th Khalifa, Hazrat Mirza Tahir Ahmad Rahmatullah. In the sermon, Hazur mentioned that Talib Sahab, who was working on a brand new documentary for MTA about the Nusrat Jahan scheme, was in Ghana at the time when he died. Hazur spoke about how dedicated and sincere Talib Sahab was to his Waqf and how much he loved Hazur more than anything else. Beloved Hazur narrated a number of beautiful things about Talib Sahab and a number of incidents and examples from Talib Sahab's life which we can all learn from.
شاید 2-3 سال پہلے اس نے ایک نظم لکھی تھی جو اس نے اپنے کسی دوست کو دی تھی کہ اپنے پاس رکھ لو اور کسی کو نہیں دکھانی، جو خلافت سے تعلق اور پیار سے متعلق لکھی ہوئی تھی. اور اس نے شروع ہی اس طرح کیا تھا کہ میں خلیفہ وقت سے سب سے زیادہ پیار کرتا ہوں، اور ختم اس طرح کیا تھا کہ خلیفہ وقت سے جو مجھے پیار ہے اور محبت ہے وہ انہیں کبھی پتہ نہیں چلے گی، لیکن اے پیارے تارے، میں تمہیں بتاتا ہوں کہ تمہارے ان آخری الفاظ سے پہلے بھی مجھے پتہ تھا کہ تمہیں خلافت سے پیار اور محبت کا تعلق تھا. تمہارے ہر عمل سے، ہر حرکت و سکون سے، جب تمہارے ہاتھ میں کیمرہ ہوتا تھا اور میں سامنے ہوتا تھا تب بھی، اور جب تم کیمرے کے علاوہ ملتے تھے، چاہے ذاتی ملاقات ہو یا دفتر کے کام سے، تمہاری آنکھوں کی چمک سے اس محبت کا اظہار ہوتا تھا. تمہارے چہرے کی ایک عجیب قسم کی رونق سے اس محبت کا اظہار ہوتا تھا. غرض کہ ہر طرح تمہارے ہر عمل سے یہ لگ رہا ہوتا تھا کہ کس طرح تم اس محبت کا اظہار کرو جو تمہیں خلیفہ وقت سے ہے. مجھے شاید ہی کسی میں اس محبت کا اظہار نظر آتا ہو.
Speaking about Talib Sahab's obedience to Khilafat, Hazur said that once in a meeting, Hazur has said that all missionaries should offer tahajjud prayers for at least 1 hour a day. Now, even though Talib Sahab was not a missionary himself, he heard the instruction and decided that from then on, he too would do his best to do exactly as Hazur had instructed. This shows us how important it is for all of us to try and find out what Hazur's instructions are and then try and act on them as well, no matter who they were first said to. Hazur declared Sayyid Talib Ahmed Sahab to be an example for all of us to follow. His humility, dedication, love for Khilafat, work ethic and truthfulness, all shining examples for us to emulate. May Allah enable us all to learn from his example and be servants of Khilafat. Ameen. These were just a few incidents from the sermon. To hear more inspiring incidents, please make sure you watch the full Friday sermon with your family. Until next time, Assalamu alaikum.
Jazakallah for that summary. And as always, we encourage you to watch the whole Friday sermon, which is available online.
Now, for our In Focus, we take a look at climate change.
Climate has changed throughout Earth's long history, but this time it's different. Human activity is causing worldwide temperatures to rise higher and faster than any time we know of in the past.
And in order to find out more, we head over to Australia, where Kamran takes a look at how human-caused climate change contributed to some of the worst climate that Australia has seen.
Natural causes of climate change are always slowly changing the Earth's temperature and rainfall. But human activity, such as fossil fuel burning for energy and transportation, has caused large amounts of greenhouse gases, such as carbon dioxide, to be released into the air and has trapped heat inside the atmosphere. Climate change has begun to harm the environment around us, with Australia being affected by natural disaster almost every year. For example, this lake behind me can completely dry up when there's no rain. But as of right now, it is nice and full as rain has been falling as normal. But what exactly is climate change? Well, earlier today, I spoke with Ismail, who told me a little bit more about what climate change exactly is. Assalamu alaikum, Ismail Saab. So can you please explain to me what exactly is climate change?
When we say climate change, what we mean is this slow and gradual process through which the weather pattern of an area changes over a minimum of 25 years.
How is climate change affecting us here in Australia, Ismail Saab?
Australia burns so much coal to generate electricity for its residents. And we know that in the process, carbon dioxide is released into the air. Carbon dioxide, whilst in the atmosphere, traps a lot of heat. And so in the case of Australia, there has been an increase in the annual average temperature by 1 degree Celsius over the last 110 years.
Ismail, can you please explain how climate change has brought about more natural disasters such as bushfires, floods, and droughts?
We know the states of New South Wales and Queensland have seen an average of 77% reduction in annual rainfall. This leads to destructive bushfires, which leads to the destruction of the homes of a lot of native Australian animals. However, because of the rising temperature over the ocean, through the process of evaporation, we are beginning to see a lot of heavy and longer rainfalls, especially in coastal areas.
So, Ismail, I understand that the Great Barrier Reef is under threat because of climate change. What is happening over there?
The Great Barrier Reef is one of the few natural wonders in the world, but it is seeing the impact of climate change through a process called coral bleaching. Through coral bleaching, the coral loses its color and becomes weaker, and is no longer able to support a lot of animals that depend on it for their home.
It's really sad that the Great Barrier Reef, one of the wonders of the world, is being affected by climate changes in this way. Is there anything being done about climate change?
Australia has agreed to cut down on the amount of coal it burns to generate electricity. In place of that, the government is encouraging households to set up solar panels in their homes. The government is also investing in large-scale wind energy plants, all of which are renewable sources of energy.
Jazakallah for answering all of my questions on climate change, Ismail Saab. We can all play our part in helping the environment to slow down and reduce the effects of climate change so that us and all future generations have a wonderful place to live that has not been destroyed by environmental disaster. Jazakallah.
Jazakallah Kamran for that report. Let's hope we can all help to reduce the effects of climate change.
One of the most anticipated sporting events finally took place this year, after being delayed for a year. The Olympics was hosted by Japan under very difficult circumstances due to the COVID.
Now, the Olympics only come around every 4 years, where hundreds of countries come together to compete in different games. Now, Jinnah, if I was to ask you, do you know when the Olympics roughly started?
If I was to take a guess, I'd say around 2300 years ago.
It's not a bad guess, actually a very good guess. In fact, the Olympics started nearly 3,000 years ago. Let's find out what happened in the most recent games with this report.
After a year's delay, the Tokyo Olympics finally came and went last month. The sporting event took place from the 23rd of July to the 8th of August, with the Paralympics wrapping up earlier this week. With all the medals counted, the US stood atop the leaderboard with the most gold medals won, followed by China, Japan, Great Britain and Russia. The USA also took home the most medals overall, with 113 medals, followed by China with 88 medals, Russia with 71, Great Britain at 4th position with 65 medals, and Japan with 58 in 5th position. The games were not without its troubles though, as the city was in complete lockdown, and the games took place without spectators. Over the 2-week period, 151 athletes and associates tested positive for coronavirus. Despite the initial public opposition against Japan going ahead with the Summer Games, a public survey showed that 64% of participants were glad it happened. This year's Olympics will also be known for more than sports. Unlike the Norwegian handball women's team, which faced fines for defying uniform rules, the German women's gymnast team made news for making a strong statement against the way mainstream media were presenting women. While some athletes took the lead in standing up against certain clothing, others brought up the importance of taking a stand for one's mental health. 24-year-old US gymnast Simone Biles decided to step down from some of her competition's finals as she felt extremely pressurized and needed to prioritize her mental health. After the conclusion of the Olympics, it was the turn of the Paralympics, the international sports competition for athletes with disabilities. The truly inspiring games finished today, with China comfortably topping both the gold medal and the total medal standings. Yusuf Ahmadi, MTA Roundup.
We asked you to tell us what you think about the topics we covered in today's program, and here's what you had to say.
Allah Ta'ala wants us to protect our planet, so we should keep it nice and safe.
Climate change is a big problem nowadays. To save our Earth, everyone should play their role.
I feel extremely sad about the situation in Afghanistan, how people are forced to flee from their country, leaving everything behind. It's heartbreaking that children are having to go through such a traumatic experience too.
I feel for all of the innocent people in Afghanistan, and I pray that Allah Ta'ala can help them and guide the country to Ahmadiyyat, freeing them from the Taliban.
It is heartbreaking to see so many people dying in Afghanistan every day. We pray that this war ends soon and everyone lives in peace.
Keep an eye out for our social media channels for upcoming topics every week, so you can send us your views to be featured on Roundup.
Now we have another episode of our regular feature around the world.
Last week, Atfal in Germany were fortunate enough to have a virtual Mulaqat with Hazur. Have you ever wondered what this experience is like? Let's find out.
Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Mein Name ist Silbe Navid. Ich bin 13 Jahre alt und heute sind wir hier in Maimarkt in Mannheim. Hier hat auch mal das Jalsa stattgefunden und auch das Ijtima für Lajna und Ansarullah. Und wir haben hier heute ein virtuelles Mulaqat und Glas mit den Hazur. Wir gehen jetzt mal rein und schauen mal, wie die Atmosphäre dort ist von den Brüdern. Also jetzt sind wir hier vor dem, wo Hazur gleich kommen wird, und hier sehen Sie auch 1000 von Atfals. Und natürlich ist das für mich auch ein sehr gutes Gefühl, dass ich wieder Hazur sehen kann. Es gab sehr lange Corona und man konnte auch nicht mehr so große Veranstaltungen machen. Und die Atfal freuen sich auch bestimmt. Wir warten jetzt auf den Khalifa. Wie fühlst du dich gerade so, auf Hazur zu warten und so?
Also ich fühle mich sehr, sehr gut, dass ich gleich Hazur vor mir sehen werde. Und ich bin auch sehr, sehr aufgeregt. Ja, natürlich sehr, sehr schwer, morgens aufzustehen, weil man will ja lieber schlafen. Aber das ist hier Hazur und für Hazur wird man alles tun.
मैं जवां हिम्मत हूँ मेरी है बुलंदी पर नजर मैं जवां हिम्मत हूँ मेरी.
Also wir sind jetzt zu Ende mit Mulaqat mit Tasur und es war sehr schön, weil nach ganz langer Zeit mit Tasur live zu reden und zu sehen, dass er auf uns reagiert, es war sehr schön. Wir haben auch so vieles zusammen gelacht und man hat auch vieles daraus gelernt, zum Beispiel wenn man in schwerer Zeit es nicht aufgeben soll.
Die Liebe von Tasur ist, dass er unseren Atfal heute die segensreiche Möglichkeit gewährt hat, eine Stunde lang mit ihm, wenn auch nur virtuell, aber live zu interagieren und so auf so eine so schöne und liebevolle Art und Weise den Atfal in ihren Gedanken zu unterstützen, bei ihren Fragen zu helfen und recht zu leiten. Ja? Es ist eine einmalige Möglichkeit gewesen, die wir Alhamdulillah etwa 1000 Atfal ermöglichen konnten.
Also es war sehr, sehr schön zu sehen, dass die Atfal halt diesen Bezug zu Khilafat haben und ihren Khalifen sehen möchten. Während der Mulaqat, Tasur war sehr glücklich und sehr froh und hat auch viele kleine Spielchen gemacht mit den Atfal.
Für mich war die Mulaqat sehr interessant. Das war mein erster Mulaqat, die ich mit Tasur gemacht habe und ich habe mich sehr gefreut. Ja, ich werde es schon vermissen, weil ich schon seit sehr langer Zeit niemals mit Tasur getroffen bin oder etwas gefragt habe oder mit ihm geredet habe.
कमर जिसकी आमद की गवाही दे गए शम्सो कमर.
That is all the time we have for now. Make sure to send us your comments and feedback to roundup@mta.tv.
You can follow us on Twitter and Instagram for updates. We'll be back next week with another episode of Roundup.
Until then, Assalamu alaikum.
Thy message to reach all the corners of the earth.